Frank Sinatra sat in room 847, staring at a contract that would end his career. His hands were shaking, not from the bourbon, though he'd had plenty. From fear. The kind of fear that comes when you realize the walls are closing in and there's no way out. 3 men stood around him. Sam Giancana, Chicago outfit. Johnny Formosa, muscle from Detroit. And Rocco Fischetti, Al Capone's cousin. They weren't there to negotiate. The contract was already written. Sinatra would perform exclusively for mob-owned venues. 50% of his earnings, straight to them. Every movie deal, every record, every nightclub appearance, they'd own him. Completely. Sign it, Frank. Giancana's voice was calm. Too calm. Or we make sure you never sing again. Not a threat. A promise. Sinatra had heard the stories. Singers who didn't cooperate. Broken fingers. Damaged vocal cords. Sometimes worse. He reached for the pen. That's when the door opened. Nobody had knocked. The 3 mobsters spun around, hands moving toward their guns. A tall black man walked in. Dressed in a perfect charcoal suit, fedora tilted just right. He moved like he owned the room, like he owned the entire hotel. Bumpy Johnson. In his right hand, a leather briefcase. In his left, something that made Giancana's eyes narrow. A straight razor. Open. The light caught the blade. "Room's occupied," Giancana said. His hand stayed near his jacket. Bumpy closed the door behind him with his foot. Never took his eyes off the 3 men. "I know. I'm here for the meeting." "This is a private matter." Formosa stepped forward. "You need to leave." Bumpy walked to the table, set the briefcase down. The razor stayed in his hand, casual, like he was holding a cigarette. "Frank, you want me here?" Sinatra looked up. His face was pale, exhausted. For a moment he didn't speak. Then, barely a whisper. Yeah, I do." Giancana's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake, Frank." The singer just stared at the table. Bumpy pulled out a chair, sat down, placed the razor on the table in front of him. Blade still open, still catching the light. "All right then, let's talk business." To understand what happened in that hotel room, you need to understand how Frank Sinatra ended up there. 1952 was supposed to be his comeback year. Instead, it was almost his funeral. 5 years earlier, Sinatra was the biggest star in America. Bobby Soxers fainting at his concerts. Movies, records, radio shows. He was untouchable. Then it all fell apart. His voice gave out. Vocal cord hemorrhage. His marriage to Ava Gardner was a public disaster. The press turned on him. Communist sympathizer, they called him. Un-American. His record label dropped him. His movie studio tore up his contract. By 1952, Frank Sinatra was broke, blacklisted, and desperate. That's when the mob smelled blood. See, the Italian Mafia had always had a relationship with Sinatra. They'd helped him early in his career. Small favors. Club bookings in Jersey. Protection from union trouble. Frank thought those were friendly gestures. They weren't. They were investments. And now, with Sinatra vulnerable, the mob wanted their return. Sam Giancana saw an opportunity. Control Sinatra. Control his comeback. Control his comeback. Control Hollywood connections, Vegas bookings, political access. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a singer. He was a key to every door the mob wanted to open. So Giancana set the trap. Got Sinatra bookings in Miami. Paid his travel. Covered his hotel. Made Frank feel grateful. Then came the meeting. The contract. The ultimatum. What Giancana didn't know was that Sinatra had one friend left. A friend who didn't give a damn about the Italian Mafia's plans. Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy and Frank met in 1946, not in some Hollywood party, in Harlem. Sinatra had come uptown to the Apollo Theater, unusual for a white entertainer, but Frank had always loved black music. Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie. That night after his performance, some local guys tried to shake him down in the alley. "Welcome to Harlem Tax," they called it. Bumpy happened to be walking by, saw what was happening. The guys saw Bumpy and scattered like roaches when the light comes on. Frank tried to thank him with money. Bumpy refused. Instead, they talked. About music. About respect. About how the system treated people it considered beneath it. They became unlikely friends. When Frank's career collapsed, most people abandoned him. Bumpy didn't. When Bumpy heard about the Miami meeting, heard about Giancana's contract, he made a decision. Nobody owns anybody. Not in Harlem. Not anywhere. He took the next train to Florida. Back in room 847, the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. Giancana stared at Bumpy, stared at the razor on the table. "You know who I am?" Giancana asked. Bumpy smiled. No warmth in it. "Sam Giancana, Chicago outfit. You killed your first man at 19, 42 more since then. You run everything from Lake Michigan to the Mexican border." Giancana's eyes flickered. Surprise, maybe respect. "Then you know this is none of your business." Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "Frank's my friend. That makes it my business." "Friends don't mean nothing in this world," Formosa said. He was getting agitated. Bumpy could see it. The way his shoulders tensed. The way he kept glancing at the razor. "Friends mean everything," Bumpy replied. "That's the difference between you and me." Giancana held up his hand. Stopped Formosa from saying something stupid. "Let's be civilized about this. You came here for a reason. What do you want?" Bumpy reached for his briefcase. All three mobsters shifted. Hands moved toward guns. Bumpy opened the case slowly. Pulled out a single piece of paper. His own contract. He slid it across the table to Giancana. Read it. Giancana picked it up. His eyes scanned the page, then scanned it again. His face went rigid. "This is a joke." "No joke," Bumpy said. "Those are the terms." The contract was simple. Frank Sinatra would be left alone. Completely. No mob bookings, no forced appearances, no percentage of anything. In exchange, Bumpy would guarantee that certain Harlem operations stayed neutral in the Chicago outfit's ongoing war with the New York families. "You're offering me nothing," Giancana said. His voice had an edge now. "I'm offering you peace in a war that's costing you $50,000 a month." Giancana's jaw worked. The Chicago outfit's conflict with the New York families had been bleeding money and men. Harlem was neutral territory, but if that changed, if Harlem chose sides, the balance would shift. "How do I know you can deliver that? Because when I give my word, it means something, unlike some people." The insult hung in the air. Formosa's hand went inside his jacket. Bumpy didn't move, didn't even look at Formosa. His eyes stayed locked on Giancana. The razor sat on the table between them, within reach. Giancana raised his hand again. Formosa froze. "You walk in here," Giancana said slowly, "into a room with 3 armed men, and you think we're just going to let you dictate terms?" Bumpy finally looked at Formosa, then at Fischetti, then back to Giancana. "I walked in here because I knew you were smart enough to see the deal. If I was wrong, if you're just another thug who can't see past tomorrow, then we got a different kind of problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where I walk out of here. Frank walks out of here. And you explain to your bosses why the Chicago outfit is at war with every black organization from Harlem to Detroit. You're bluffing." Bumpy stood up, picked up the razor, folded it closed with one hand, put it in his pocket. "Then shoot me. Find out." The silence in that room was absolute. Giancana was a killer. Had been since he was a teenager. He'd faced down cops, federal agents, rival mobsters. He'd ordered hits on people who looked at him wrong. But sitting there, looking at Bumpy Johnson, he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Doubt. Because Bumpy wasn't posturing, wasn't playing tough guy. He'd stated facts and walked toward the door. That's the thing about real power. It doesn't need to shout. Bumpy's hand was on the doorknob when Giancana spoke. "Wait." Bumpy stopped. Didn't turn around. 3 months, Giancana said. "You guarantee Harlem stays neutral for 3 months. I'll consider your terms." Bumpy turned around slowly. 6 months. "And you don't consider anything. You sign. Or I walk, and tomorrow morning, every crew from the Bronx to Philadelphia knows the Chicago outfit tried to strong-arm Bumpy Johnson and backed down. Your reputation won't survive it." Giancana's knuckles went white, gripping the table. "Nobody threatens me. I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice. Bad business or good business. Choose." The two men stared at each other. Sinatra sat frozen. Formosa and Fischetti waited for the order to shoot. It never came. Giancana picked up a pen. 6 months, he said. "Harlem stays neutral. Frank Sinatra walks free. But if you break your word, if Harlem interferes even once, this deal is void. And Frank becomes our problem again." Bumpy walked back to the table, picked up Giancana's contract for Sinatra, tore it in half, then in half again, dropped the pieces on the floor. "Deal." Giancana signed Bumpy's contract. One signature. No witnesses needed. In that world, your word and your signature were the same thing. Break either one, you were dead. Bumpy folded the contract, put it in his briefcase, looked at Sinatra. "Let's go, Frank." Sinatra stood up on shaking legs, started toward the door. "Bumpy," Giancana's voice stopped them. "This doesn't mean we're friends." "Never thought it did," Bumpy replied. "But it means we're not enemies, and in this business, that's worth more than friendship." They walked out, left three mobsters sitting in stunned silence. In the hallway, Sinatra finally spoke. "How did you know he wouldn't kill you?" Bumpy pressed the elevator button. "Because men like Giancana respect one thing: strength. And I showed him I wasn't afraid to die. That makes me too expensive to kill." The elevator arrived. They got in. But what if he'd called your bluff? Bumpy looked at him, smiled that same cold smile from earlier. "Who said I was bluffing?" The doors closed. Here's what happened after that night. Frank Sinatra got the role in From Here to Eternity, won an Oscar. His career exploded bigger than before. Vegas, movies, the Rat Pack, everything. He never forgot what Bumpy did. For the next 16 years, until Bumpy's death in 1968, Sinatra made sure Bumpy never wanted for anything. Quiet money, connections, favors, the kind of friendship that doesn't need publicity. Sam Giancana kept his word too. 6 months, Harlem stayed neutral. The Chicago outfit stabilized. Eventually, Giancana and Bumpy developed a mutual respect. Not friends, never friends, but they understood each other. Both men who'd built empires from nothing. Both men who knew that real power isn't about who has the most guns. It's about who's willing to walk into a room and bet everything on their word. And that razor? The one Bumpy brought to the meeting? Years later, a reporter asked Bumpy about it. Why bring a razor to a gunfight? Bumpy laughed. That wasn't for them. What was it for then? Insurance. If things went bad, if they'd tried to kill Frank right there, I wasn't going to let them make it quick. The reporter didn't understand. Bumpy explained. You bring a gun, people see it as a threat. They prepare for it. You bring a razor, people see something else. They see someone who's willing to get close. Someone who's not afraid of blood. Someone who'll make it personal. And that, Bumpy said, that scares them more than any bullet. The truth is, we'll never know if Bumpy would have used that razor. We'll never know what his backup plan was if Giancana had called his bluff. What we do know is this. On that night in 1952, in a hotel room in Miami Beach, Bumpy Johnson walked into an impossible situation and changed history. Not with violence, not with money, with respect, with strategy, with the kind of courage that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for. Frank Sinatra was supposed to become the mob's puppet. Instead, he became a legend. And Bumpy Johnson, the man from Harlem who read Shakespeare in prison, who understood that loyalty meant more than fear, who walked into a room with 3 killers and a razor and walked out with a victory, he became something else. Untouchable. Not because nobody could kill him, because nobody wanted to try. That contract Bumpy made Giancana sign? Frank kept it, framed it, hung it in his private office in Palm Springs, next to a photograph. Bumpy Johnson and Frank Sinatra. 2 men from different worlds, connected by one night. One choice, one friendship that proves something the mob never understood. You can't own somebody who's already free. And you can't intimidate somebody who's already decided they'd rather die than bow. February 12th, 1952. 3 mobsters tried to take Frank Sinatra's future. Bumpy Johnson walked in with a contract and a razor. And the mob blinked first. Remember that. Power isn't about who shouts loudest. It's about who means what they say. And Bumpy Johnson always meant every word.